Today we are going to take a very close look at an amazing $260 monitor from iKan. Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, where it's all about making better videos. A big help to making better videos is to have a really good monitor. Now there are tons of different monitors out there. Over time, I've grown to enjoy smaller monitors unless it's going to be for a setup like this where I need to have a big honking monitor. But in general, I prefer smaller monitors for use with a rig like this, and makes focusing a lot easier. And a lot of the camera monitors or screens aren't very good. So I've always been looking for stuff like this, nice small monitors. And this is the iKan VL35. It is a 3.5 inch screen. The beauty of this also is the cost. This thing is $260. Really amazing considering the functions on this, the assist features, and it has HDMI in and out. So let's go over to the bench and take a real close look at this amazing little monitor. All right, let's take a close look at the iKan VL35. This is a 3.5 inch screen. The actual dimensions, if you wanted to draw it out on a piece of paper to kind of get a more physical feel of the size, is 4 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches tall. Thickness is, I believe, 3/4 inches, and that doesn't include the battery or battery plate on the back. On the front, there's really not much going on here except for the screen itself. On the top, we have function 1, function 2, which we'll take a look at later, power, menu, and then left and right. On the bottom, we have a 1/4-20, and then on the left side of the monitor, here's our composite in, and on the right, we have a headphone jack or 3.5mm out, which is going to be great for cameras like the Sony a6300 because we can have a headphone jack over HDMI. The battery plate comes stock with an LPE6 battery plate, but you can order other battery plates if you don't want to use it. There's a small up arrow tab here to remove the battery plate, like so. And while we have this off, we can look at some power options because we also have this DC input. And if you look back here, operating voltage is 6 to 24 volts, which is great. That means you could almost power this thing off of a USB battery. That's good because we can run, external batteries to our camera and this unit because it doesn't need a lot of voltage. So it's a really, really great feature to me. So having that DC input is great. You could leave the battery plate off if you wanted a really slim monitor setup and just power it off of AC power or an external battery. And there's other information on this sticker here, and the big selling feature, which we're going to look at a little bit later, is it accepts 4K signals. So we can look on the back here and we see you have 720p, 1080i or P, and then 2160p. So all the way up to 4K, not just UHD, but actual cinema 4K. So I'm going to put the battery all back on here. When you add a new battery, I believe it turns on by default. So there you go, it's powered up. And one thing I don't like is there's an LED on the top that you can probably see there. It's glowing green when it's on. I'm gonna hit the power button, and then it glows red when it is off. That tells me that there's power being drawn from the battery even while this unit is off, quote unquote. I have noticed if you leave a battery on here and throw it on a shelf or in a bag over a couple days, this will drain the battery. So wish they didn't do that. I don't know why people do that with their technology. At any rate, we're gonna go back to the back and we have a USB for firmware updates. I haven't checked to see if this will actually accept power. That would be interesting to use USB batteries to power this whole thing. And then we have HDMI in and HDMI out. So yes, there is pass-through. You could run an HDMI out to another device. So that's a really slick feature, especially for a small and affordable monitor like the iKan VL35. So let's go ahead and plug this into some cameras and see what we have. So I'm going to plug the HDMI in. We'll start with the Sony a6300. So I reframe things so you can see everything a little closer since this is such a small monitor. First thing I want to note is I don't think this is an IPS monitor because if I turn it here, you can see the viewing angle is pretty limited. So you're not going to be able to easily see things from the side. You're going to kind of need to look right on at the monitor itself. So let's jump into the menu. So we hit the menu button. Here you can see we have input source, guides, video config, system config, function setup, firmware, and exit. So there are guides, and there are many of them. We'll look at some of those options here in a second. So I'm going to go down to back. Video config, here we have brightness, contrast, all that kind of stuff that you normally would see. I did notice out of the box, sharpness was set to 50, and it was crazy sharp. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of focusing, that could be really handy, and that's a huge feature we'll talk about and why I really love this monitor. I would recommend otherwise dropping sharpness to around 30. That's still really sharp, but it is a lot easier to view unless you really want to emphasize sharpness. System config doesn't have anything fun to look at, so we're going to move down to function setup. Two functions on this camera. I have two set up right now that we'll take a look at. There are a lot of different functions, and we'll go through a few of my favorites. So, going back to the main screen, I'm going to hit the function 1 button, and that turns on pixel to pixel. So because this monitor supports 4K signals, we can actually get a pixel to pixel of our 4K image on this monitor. So here is a really boring shot of a vise on my desk. I'm going to hit the pixel to pixel, and now I have a super crazy blown up shot that I can work with. So really, really slick. I think that's awesome, especially for a small monitor like this. It'll allow you to really make sure your focus is set. That said, you can't adjust where it samples this pixel to pixel, so it just uses the center of the screen. So that's something to keep in mind. Function 2 I have set to guides. And as you'll see here, there are tons of different guides on this monitor, which is really slick and allows you to make sure you get perfect framing if you're doing something like this where you know your final project is going to have an aspect ratio of 2:3:5 or something like that. So lots of great options there. Let's go back into the menu, go back to function setup, and I'm going to change the guides. As you can see, there's tons of different options here, and we're going to go to peaking. Now in general, I don't really care much for peaking. So now we have peaking set up for our function 2. I'm going to press that, and there we have focus peaking. So pretty straightforward. Honestly, I just never trust focus peaking. So for those of you who love it, it is here. But I think using this monitor, which we'll talk about in a second, just to look at the monitor is going to give you a much better idea of where your focus is landing. So I'm going to go back to function setup, change peaking again. False color is on this monitor, which is pretty crazy for such a cheap monitor. This is a great feature, and most monitors do not have this at this price range. So when we have it turned on, we have a scale at the bottom, and they have different colors, and that's going to represent a exposure level on the IRE scale. So we can see a lot of my image is landing in a pretty good area, and as I change my exposure, that is going to affect what's going on here. So if I jack it up, we can see I'm in trouble. So I'm really impressed that this was on this monitor. When I bought it, I didn't even look at that. I just wanted a monitor that supported 4K and was HDMI at this size. So I was really tickled to see that this is an option. So really, really love that. Let's go back to function menu, change false color, clip guides, which is kind of a slick little feature if you're using a Canon DSLR or a camera that doesn't have a lot of exposure settings. You can go back and exit, hit function 2, and as I change my exposure, the monitor will tell me just what's going to be beyond repair, so whatever is completely blown out and gone forever. So here we see I've got, I'm getting in trouble in a lot of areas. So that's a slick little feature if you just want to real quickly check, you know, is anything over 100 and am I screwed? So that's a nice little feature. Let's go back in, function setup, change clip guide, understand DSLR scaling. So for those of you using DSLRs and you're all excited about your new monitor, and then you turn it on, plug it in, and it squeezes the image down because the way the menus and everything work and the HDMI output works. Using DSLR scaling will fix that. So that's a slick little option. We have a histogram and zooming in 5D record. So if you have a 5D, this will actually send a record signal over to the camera. At least that's what I understand. I haven't had a 5D in forever, so I can't really test that. And we're back to the beginning. So lots of fantastic options. My favorites are going to be that pixel to pixel. Let me change my exposure because this is ridiculous. Pixel to pixel is going to be a really, really great one, as well as peaking and guides if you need to be using that kind of thing. So very, very powerful when it comes to functions on such a cheap monitor. Now I want to talk about this weird phenomenon of a low resolution small monitor taking in a 4K resolution. So the resolution of this monitor is 800 by 480, which is pretty small, but it really doesn't matter because the screen size is so stinking small. And what I love about this monitor is it reminds me a lot of my GH4 monitor. The screen is so sharp on the GH4, and I've never used peaking, and it's worked really well. So you can tell the focus right on the back of the screen. And this monitor from iKan is very similar. It is so stinking sharp. So I've really enjoyed using this for checking my focus, and because it's got that giant 4K resolution in, it does a great job. So I think this is a huge prime candidate for pretty much any camera if you want a small, light monitor that isn't going to beef up your camera rig or camera setup. So that's where I really love this monitor. It's really hard to show you, in a video like this, but you'll be amazed if you pick one of these up how stinking sharp your image is going to look, especially when you are coming from something like a A6300 screen, which isn't nearly as good as a GH4. So that's kind of a close look at this monitor. I think it is perfect for people who want to keep a small rig setup, who want some extra assist features, and don't want to break the bank. So that does it for this review of the iKan VL35. Check the link in the description to figure out where you can pick one of these up. And also please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this here at DSLR Video Shooter. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.